Scott Barrett at 6. Looks like Foster's read the same book. Roll that intro. The Game 2 squads are out, guys. Ireland versus the All Blacks in the first test match of the series, the second game of the tour. And what should be an exciting match there at Eden Park, which is going to be sold out, for the second time in a couple of weeks, with the Super Rugby final recently being there as well. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of the game last night from the Māori All Blacks. I think largely these are independent games and are independent outcomes I'm expecting. So this is a far more experienced side from the Irish than we saw from the inexperienced side produced last night. They certainly had issues last night with game management and other areas that will be far improved in this game. And this team has beaten the All Blacks on a number of occasions, so I think there's still a level of confidence that this squad will carry despite the loss last night. And I do think largely we can treat them as independent games and independent squads. Just summarising the All Blacks, so we've got two players on debut, Leicester Fainga'anuku and Pitagas Sowakula, both exciting prospects, right? So Leicester Fainga'anuku brings a lot of physicality, and has quite high rugby IQ as well, big size, big body, and same for Pitagas Sowakula. Big body, mobile with ball in hands, tends to beat the first defender on most occasions. So really excited for those two guys, and congratulations for inclusion in the team. Beauden Barrett wins the Battle of the Thames. There's been a lot of debate in New Zealand about Beauden Barrett versus Richie Mo'unga. Foster has gone for Barrett, which is unsurprising for Foster coached teams. And Scott Barrett gets the nod at blindside. So the All Blacks will be carrying 3 locks in the starting lineup and no locks on the bench as cover there. So again, the blindside flanker has been a big talking point in New Zealand around who would get the nod. And it just hints that the All Blacks are trying to play a more physical game and try and match the physicality that Irish have brought to them on many occasions in recent years. Notably, this is the first time that Scott Barrett has played 6 for the All Blacks since the World Cup semi-final. Obviously, the All Blacks dropped that to England. And I think when we reflect on that, and just why I was sort of reflecting on the, Steve Hansen's book, is that Steve Hansen did come out and say that he got that selection wrong previously. He noted it was a really difficult decision between Scott Barrett starting at lock or dropping someone experienced like Sam Whitelock. Upon reflection, he actually thinks he made the wrong call, that he should have had a difficult conversation with a highly experienced person like Sam Whitelock and told him that he's going in a different direction with a young, enthusiastic, and powerful Scott Barrett. He wasn't able to make that call at that time, and it looks like Foster has gone with a similar level of decision making, that he wants to bring physicality to the squad, thinks that Scott Barrett can bring that, and Scott Barrett's certainly been one of the form players in Super Rugby this year, so I'm not surprised by the call here. It's just going to be very interesting to see how it plays out when you look at the decision that was made in the World Cup semi-final against England. For the Irish, as I mentioned, a highly experienced team that have recently had success against the All Blacks in the past, so they'll be far improved from that team that was obviously played last night against the Māori All Blacks. What I will say is interesting is a large number of players are backing up from last night's game, so that could start to have an impact later in the tour, and maybe this is a way of Farrell managing minutes early on in the tour. But we have Keith Earls, who was named to start on the wing. He played 80 minutes last night on the wing, so he's being asked to do so again. Cian Healy looked like he was gone for all money in this series, to be honest, and there were real concerns around when we'd see him again and whether it'd be part of the tour. Even Andy Farrell last night in his interviews sort of alluded to the fact that it looked really bad, that injury. But here he is on the bench, and the entire bench is essentially players backing up from last night. So I think in 2 games in a week, okay, that's manageable. When you start to get 5 games in 3 weeks, that's when it becomes a real concern. So I don't think, with the exception of Cian Healy, I think there are probably some concerns around his fitness for this match. But for the others, at this point in time in the tour, I don't think there's major concerns in terms of their minutes management or anything else in that respect. So with that, let's get to the squads. Okay, front row for Ireland: Porter, Sheehan and Furlong. Great scrummaging unit. Obviously, Ronan Kelleher unavailable for this tour, so he would have certainly featured there, I believe, and was part of the squad that defeated the All Blacks last year. So that's an experienced, strong scrummaging unit and an experienced line-out, so the All Blacks can expect great sort of set-piece work and scrummaging work from the Irish. Tyke Byrne and James Ryan get the nod, obviously, there at lock. Tall, experienced, Tyke Byrne is a very big human being, so there'll be a lot of physicality that he brings to the table. And then we've got Peter O'Mahony, Van der Flair, and Caelan Doris. So I'm excited about seeing that battle between Caelan Doris and Ardie Savia there. We know that these guys have great strengths in the breakdown, so that's going to be a real area of focus for the All Blacks. O'Mahony there instead of Jack Conan, who was previously there. I know a number of Irish supporters seem to think that Jack Conan is slightly out of form right now, so Peter O'Mahony gets the nod there. 9-10, Gibson Park and Johnny Sexton. Johnny Sexton is your captain. Settled lineup, obviously, great partnership brewing between those two players. To the midfield, we've got Henshaw and Ringrose, both experienced in the Irish makeup. Back three, James Lowe, Keith Earls, and Keenan there at the back. So this just looks like a really settled team. Obviously, strengths there in the set piece, in the forwards, at the breakdown, game management with Gibson Park and Sexton, and game breakers with Lowe, Ringrose, and Keenan there at the back. So I think we see very similar to what we saw late last year for the Irish against the All Blacks in terms of their playing style, obviously, and where they will have strengths. It's really going to be incumbent on the All Blacks to try and battle back and try and rectify some of those issue areas that they had last year and try to improve performances, particularly in the collision, breakdown, and other physical areas. Looking at the reserves, as I mentioned, so all backing up from last night, Heffernan, Bielim, and Healy. Notably, Bielim can play both sides of the scrum. So if Healy is scratched, potentially they bring someone in on the other side of the scrum as opposed to, moving Bielim out there. Treadwell, Conan, Murray, Carberry, and Bundy Arki, who had the captaincy last night, is there in the match day 23. So it's going to be interesting how they manage the minutes in the context from the bench, in the context of the entire tour. But this looks like a highly experienced squad named for the Irish. On the other side for the All Blacks, I think some interesting selections here. So Bauer and Taylor have been standouts certainly at the Super Rugby level. Tu'ungafasi as well. He really had a great start to the season. Did start to drop off towards the end of the season. Unfortunately, in the final, didn't have a great game there and was shown up by some of the Crusaders players there in the final of the Super Rugby. They are going to have a real challenge on their hands in managing the scrums. It's going to be interesting, the battle there, and whether or not they can at least get scrum parity there in the beginning and throughout the rest of the game. Retallick gets the nod at lock with Whitelock. Now, I think Whitelock and Barrett have probably been the form locks in Super Rugby, certainly Scott Barrett. So interesting that he wasn't named at lock. Again, we know what they're trying to achieve here by bringing more physicality. And Retallick's certainly not a player that will let you down, but when I look at the makeup of these forwards and the wider team at large, to be honest, it's starting to feel a little bit similar to previous years. We've seen this kind of model and approach, and I just wonder if the All Blacks are acting a trick somewhat in trying to blood in new players and look at a different approach, in advance of the World Cup. And we're at a critical phase in preparation for the World Cup. So to stick with a proven model, fair enough. But, I just feel to win a World Cup, you probably need to start coming up with new innovations and new ideas to try and work around some of the strengths that other teams have. Not seeing it specifically in this lineup just yet. Sam Cane is your captain, obviously, with Scott Barrett and Ardie Savia joining in the back row. I'm looking forward to the battle between Caelan Doris and Ardie Savia. Down here in New Zealand, a lot of people think Ardie Savia is the best 8 running around. It would be hard to argue with that. I know there are some great European number 8s, particularly from France, and Caelan Doris is right up there in my opinion as well. Aaron Smith gets the nod at halfback. Beauden Barrett we spoke about, so obviously an experienced partnership, they'll go well. In the midfield, Quinn Tupaia gets the nod at 12. We do know that a large number of players were struck down, unfortunately, with COVID, weren't available for selection. He has had a great year at Super Rugby level, great with crash ball in hand, able to get over the gain line, and this is a bit of a statement of intent when you look at the back line here. Fainga'anuku typically gets over the gain line. Quinn Tupaia gets over the gain line, and so does Severis. So they've really stacked this to be physical in the backs. It's going to be interesting how they do front up when in those collision areas during the game. Geordie Barrett there at the back at 15. Obviously great under the high ball, good game management, and can kick long range penalties as well. So really adds a bit of strength there from the back. To the reserves, I'm actually quite excited about the makeup of the reserves. I think you've got quite an exciting blend here of physicality, great ball runners, just guys that love the collision area. Toke in my view, has been the best hooker in Super Rugby level this year. So I do hope that they give him a chance to start at some stage before the World Cup. I think that's a selection that we really need to look at hooker. Is Toke someone who could potentially surpass Taylor and be, the starting hooker as opposed to coming on for impact off the bench? That's something we'll just monitor as the games progress. Tuinukuafe, who is not staying in New Zealand, so is a selection specifically for this series to try and anchor the scrum if required later in the game. And Angus Ta'aval there as well, ready to go off the bench. Also had a good season for the Chiefs. Pitagas Sawakula is your debutant, no lock on the bench here. And Dalton Papali'i, who's been struggling with an injury somewhat, is there on the bench. Now, I watched the press conference with Ian Foster. He was, sort of 50-50 about the selection of Papali'i, mainly because he's managing an injury, but he gets the nod here, and they'll probably manage his minutes throughout this game. Christie gets the nod over Fakatava. I know a lot of people wanted to see Fakatava, myself included. I just think it's the stage to try and put players, much like Ireland did last night, in high-pressure game environments to see how they progress in advance of a Rugby World Cup. Both teams are trying to use this series to really blood in new players and to try and build their experience in high-pressure environments. But Christie will not let the team down, and he's had a great year, great partnership with Beauden Barrett, and certainly, at this level, will not let the team down. Richie Mo'unga there on the reserves, as well as Braden Ennell, who was brought in as injury cover, or I should say COVID cover, due to a number of players going down. So with that, we know that a number of players unable to be selected with COVID, but this still looks like a strong lineup from the All Blacks. I don't think they'll look for any excuses in this one. And when I look at the makeup of the two teams, and when I look at all the factors that are at play, packed out Eden Park, obviously the record, the All Blacks with 2 losses in a row late last year, something to prove at home, on the back of a motivated Māori performance last night. It's a difficult ask for the Irish. I'll try not to give any predictions, but I will say that all factors are in favour of the All Blacks here, and I think that's something that everyone can mutually agree. That being said, this is an experienced Irish lineup with some real areas that they dominate in. And what was surprising last night, or I should say unsurprising more like, is that when the Irish players did get the ball in hand, they were able to keep it for long phases. They almost looked like they could break the line at will. And that's just, a structure that we've been accustomed to with Ireland. And you're going to see exactly the same here with obviously improved game management. So they have great game breakers. Ireland has game breakers all over the field. And the fact that they are so well drilled means that they're going to be dangerous at any point in the game. So as I mentioned, all factors here in the All Blacks' favour. Although Ireland do have a number of game breakers, great set piece, great breakdown work, well-drilled team. They're certainly dangerous in their own respect throughout the course of the game. So I'm looking forward to this match. I hope everyone else is. And that's it from me. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Enjoy the Rugby Saturday.